It's day 25 of 100 days of video, and I can't believe it's already been 25 days now. What I would like to continue talking about is forgiveness. This is all kind of with the overall theme of preparing for the holidays and being around people that you may need to forgive or that you're not comfortable being around for various reasons. So when we have a lack of forgiveness for a long period of time, somewhere in that process, that lack of forgiveness becomes a resentment. And this is a bigger deal to work on. So I once heard a very good definition of resentment. It went something like this. It said, my having a resentment would be like me taking poison and hoping that you die. The lack of forgiveness, the resentment, only hurts me more than it hurts anybody else. No matter what kind of punishment I can mete out to somebody else, or what kind of revenge or what type of retaliation that I could do, it's always going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt the other person, which may seem kind of strange, but if you focus in on it long enough, you'll understand what that is. So I also read this yesterday somewhere. Again, I don't remember. I read a lot, especially on the internet. But I read that, I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. If we hang on to resentments, our hands are too full in order to grab onto the blessings. And I thought, wow, that's really good. And a while back, some little pearls of wisdom that I came across. I found this, and this is up there on my whiteboard. Remember yesterday how I mentioned that I have, a saying on my whiteboard? Well, I also have this up there on my whiteboard. And it goes like this. It says, if I focus on the hurt, I will continue to suffer. If I focus on the lesson, I will continue to grow. Life is painful. And I love the saying that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. We choose to suffer. We may not choose to encounter pain, but pain is just a natural part of life, just like any other emotion, joy, gratitude, happiness, elation, fun, what have you. Pain is just a part of life, and it is inevitable. We will experience pain. The good news is, with pain, there is growth. If we choose to grow, we can also become very stunted, or we could just choose to grow. It's up to us. It's up to us. That's why pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So I like, whenever I'm feeling a certain pain about something, and I can finally work my way through it, I like to focus on what it is that I'm learning or what it is that I'm supposed to understand that the universe is trying to teach me. So just remember that resentments are going to hurt us more than it's going to hurt anybody else. I would like to take today and tomorrow to talk about one big pain and one big resentment and one big forgiveness that I had to do. You see, some forgivenesses just come with time and maturity, and it just comes with the process of living. Other forgivenesses take effort, and still other forgivenesses take a concerned, concentrated, conscious effort to forgive. And the forgiveness I'm going to talk about over the course of the next 2 days is the one where my brother was murdered. And we know who was the murderer. And I had to make a conscious effort over a number of years of time to forgive this person, because he never was sorry. He never apologized. In fact, he justified it, and he called my brother an SOB, and he was actually the last comment that we heard that he made about it, he was actually quite proud of himself for putting 9 bullets in my brother. So that's not an easy thing for me to forgive, and it wasn't. So I had to go through the process. But I'll describe the process more in detail tomorrow. But here's what I realized early on in this game. My brother was murdered in 1984. It took 2 years for the person who murdered him to come to trial, and it was very clear who did it. It was his best friend and former business partner, and what happened was he shot my brother 9 times, various arms, legs, and various parts of the body. There was only 1 or 2 bullets that were actually that could have been fatal. There was 1 fatal one, but there were 2 that could have been fatal. Total of 2 out of the 9. So it was an execution style murder. And then he turned around and turned the gun on himself and tried to commit suicide, but it failed in the attempt. And when his wife came home to this scene at their home, not my brother's wife, but the murderer's wife, because this took place in the murderer's home. When the murderer's wife came home to the scene, he made the comment, and there in the presence of 5 police officers, he made the comment, "I shot John, I shot myself, I shot the SOB, just leave me alone and let me die." So he was hostile. So it took 2 years for him to come to trial because the wheels of justice are slow. And with the first trial, it was very clear what happened. And the person who committed this crime was convicted of murder in the first degree and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I felt a certain sense of justice, a certain sense of satisfaction that justice was served. My brother wasn't coming back, but at least the perpetrator was being punished. So I had this sense of all is right with the world and the system works. Fast forward 5 years. The person served 5 years in the prison, and smart people know how to manipulate the system, and he read some books, and he hired some very sharp appellate attorneys. They must have cost a small fortune. And he was able to get a second trial. But in this case, again, smart people know how to manipulate the system. And in this situation, his conviction or his confession was thrown out. There were some technicalities thrown in. Essentially, the appellate decision, it was written for an acquittal. And sure enough, 7 years after the crime was committed, this man walked. The jury convicted, or I'm sorry, did not convict and came with a not guilty verdict. Now, I since then, right after that second trial, I had a chance to talk to the jury, and the jury came very close to being a hung jury with two jurors wanting to hold out and thinking he was guilty of sin, despite all of the things that the appellate decision allowed for him to get an acquittal. And so I had a chance to talk them, to let them know some of the truth that was going on that they weren't able to hear at the second trial. And we all came to terms with, they did what they had to do, and I didn't have any ill will toward the jury. And as I walked out of that courthouse, I had the most amazing realization. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, Diana, this is where sickness can come from. 20 years from now, I don't want to die from something that is unresolved as a result of how my brother died. There isn't a one of us getting out of here alive. Whether it was just or whether it was right, he was gone. It was his time to go where he clearly wouldn't have gone. And I know that if he could come back and talk to me, I could almost hear him say, look, sis, what the heck's wrong with you? I'm fine. Live your life and move on. And so I thought, I knew I had to do that. I realized if I buried or planted, because I talked about that earlier in an earlier video, if I planted feelings of anger and hatred and resentment and a sense of injustice, if I planted those, that ugly things would grow. Healthy things would not grow. If you plant ugly things grow. And I knew if I planted anger and resentment, that some kind of sickness and disease would grow. And I thought, by God, that man got one papilli. I'm not going to let him get two. I'm just not. And so I then set about the process of coming to terms with this. And it didn't start with forgiveness right off the bat. I'll tell you that right now. It started with me not wanting to, load a gun and get on my bicycle and do a bicycle by shooting, because I thought nobody would ever suspect a bicyclist. I mean, that's the kind of fantasies I entertained. And I realized, well, that's ridiculous. But at the same time, I mean, I started there where I wanted to get even. We're not from southern Italy, but for a while there, I kind of thought like, I didn't say that. Anyway, for a while I thought like the mafia, and I'm not mafia. So I had to go, it was a process. And tomorrow I'll talk more in detail about the process of actually forgiving him and what I had to do and where I had to go with it. But I walked out of that courtroom with the full awareness that if I didn't do something to help me get past this, then it was going to take me down. And I knew that as sure as I'm sitting here talking to you right now. So please realize that resentment, hatred, anger, lack of forgiveness is something, it's like you taking poison and hoping the other person dies from it, which makes no sense whatsoever. The more anger and resentment and bitterness that we experience, the more we ingest it and the sicker it's going to make us. And it may not make us sick tomorrow, but it will make us sick eventually. So I want you to know that I am perfectly living, no, not perfect, I'm not perfect, but I am living a perfectly joyous, happy, and free life. And that was by decision and by choice, by blessing, by gift. But it was also by effort too, and by design. So if I can do this, I promise you anybody can. So looking forward to talking to you more about this tomorrow. This is not an easy topic, and I'm trying to be positive with it. But the truth is sometimes bad things and ugly things happen, and we have to deal with them. And how do we get through it? God bless all of you. Talk to you tomorrow.